Hello, my name is Frank Anbari. It's my sincere pleasure to welcome to Drexel Dr. David Hillson. Dr. Hillson is a global thought leader in project risk management. He had written books, presented videos, conducted research, written papers on the subject. He is a widely acclaimed author, highly regarded and sought after presenter at conferences throughout the world. We are delighted to see Dr. Hillson here in view of his fantastic activities over many years on project management and particularly on project risk management, his active leadership in updating and developing and enhancing Project Management Institute's A Guide to the Project Management Body of Knowledge, as well as other major publications and standards that are used by many throughout the world. Welcome, Dr. Hillson. Great pleasure to see you here.
Frank, thank you very much. We've been trying to make this happen for quite a long time.
Finally,
I've made it to Drexel, so thank you very much for the welcome.
Delighted to have you here. We did have a few occasions when you came by Philadelphia, but the timing didn't work out for us to be able to come to Drexel.
And now it has. So
and now
very
it
good,
has.
very pleased.
I still, one of the visits you came here, still my memories when we went down to South Philadelphia to Pat's Steaks.
Stakeholders. We were
That's
both
right.
stakeholders. I remember that too. Stakeholder management at Pat's.
That's right.
Perfect.
So delighted that you're here because this is really a great value for students and others. And it stays there for posterity forever.
Well, that's exciting.
It's exciting. As opposed to what we have done at times where we enjoyed having you come and visit with our faculty here and other places. And I still remember the conversations. And over the years, thought about it, we benefited a lot. And I say, where did other people benefit? We kind of felt a little too selfish. Whatever we could convey to them, we tried to. But it doesn't always work that way. Somebody may forget something, they misquote it. So this is wonderful. Welcome to Drexel.
Thank you very much, Frank.
Great. You are also known as the risk doctor. Can you tell us something about what's that all about?
Yes, it's a great title, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
A lot of people say, oh, you're the risk doctor. They don't know my name, but they've, of course, heard of the risk doctor.
Sure.
And it's a great title. I've had it as a title for the last 15 years.
Fantastic.
And I think it says a lot of right things that I want to communicate. I mean, there's the doctor side. So a doctor is a trusted professional.
Sure.
Is an expert, is somebody you come to when you have a problem or when you need advice. A doctor is somebody who knows how to apply knowledge and science and wisdom to your particular situation to help you, to cure problems when they go wrong, and also to make sure that you're well and fit and healthy. So you have both the treatment of disease and the promotion of wellness. And to put that in the context of risk, then that's what I'm trying to do. And through the Risk Doctor Partnership, my colleagues are doing the same. That we're trusted professionals in risk management that you would go to if you have a difficulty, but also where you might find advice on how to be risk healthy, on how to be fit and well in the way that you deal with uncertainty. And we've got the idea of consulting as well. So you could be a consultant in medicine, also a consultant in risk management.
Well, I like associating the word healthy with risk management. That's great thought there.
Well, it's one of my major contributions, which we might come to talk about, is the idea that not all risk is bad.
Yes.
And I think that's been one of my main ideas of the last 20 years. Everyone thinks risk is about threat. It's like going to the doctor. Do you only go to the doctor when you're ill and sick and you need a cure? Or do you go if you want advice on how to be more healthy and more fit and more active and to make more of your life?
Thank you very much. As a matter of fact, we acknowledge your contribution in that area and that you got us to think, as a profession, you got us to think of the upside risk or opportunity management.
Exactly.
And others have talked about that and have plenty of discussions on that. But whenever I talk about this, I tend to mention your name almost every time to give credit.
Oh, you're very kind.
Thank you very much to say. Well, courtesy to our good colleague, Dr. David Hillson, we can talk a little more about opportunity management, because that's always some things can happen and say, hey, there's something that we can pursue there. So that's wonderful. So
well, it came from the idea, I was trying to find the kind of basic concept, the basic principle of risk to help me understand it better and to communicate it better. And one of my mottos is this, to think profoundly so you can explain simply.
Very nice.
So, you know, we do the deep thinking and really tussle with the principles and the concepts. And once we really understand the depth of a topic, then we work on how to communicate that in an easy way. So I was looking for the key principle of risk management, or risk, and I felt it was appropriate to define risk as uncertainty that matters.
Yes.
So there are lots of uncertainties in the world that don't matter. And if we want to manage risk, we have to find which of those uncertainties do matter. And the ones that matter are the ones that are linked to our objectives. We have to achieve our objectives. Any uncertainty that could affect achievement of my objectives matters. I need to know about it, understand it, analyze it, respond to it, communicate it, tell other people. The uncertainties that don't matter, I don't care about. So then I was thinking about how uncertainties matter, and any uncertainty that could hurt us and hinder us, waste time, waste money, damage reputation, injure people, that matters, and so we need to know about that. But there are also uncertainties which, if they happen, they help us, they save time. If this good thing happens, we save money, we improve performance, we improve reputation. And those things also matter. So if we find things that, if they happen, they help us to deliver our objectives faster, smarter, cheaper, they're uncertainties that matter, that must mean they're risks. If risk is uncertainty that matters, it includes the bad ones as well as the good ones. So we came to this concept of risk being double-sided. There are bad risks, we call them threats. There are good risks, we call them opportunities, but they're all risks. And then that means that the one process of risk management can deal with minimizing the bad things and maximizing the good things, which is a much more balanced and holistic approach.
It certainly is, because whenever we hear the word risk management, many of us start to think of the downside.
Of course.
Risk. But it's very important to keep thinking of the upside risk as well. So that's fantastic. And I like the idea of simplifying things, paraphrasing Einstein, simplifying things to their simplest possible format and no further. So thank you for helping us move in that direction.
But you remember there was a writer, I think it's Howard Mencken, and he said to every complex solution, to every complex problem, there is a solution which is simple, elegant, and wrong. So you can oversimplify and say, well, that sounds so easy, and then actually it doesn't address the complexity of the problem. So we don't want to get that oversimple, to be simplistic. It needs to be simple enough that it captures the concept, but not simplistic so it misses some of the deeper elements.
Yes. And of course that brings to light, as well as Ashby's law of requisite variety, that we have to have enough variety to cover the uncertainties or risks, if you would, that may arise. So combination of those thoughts can lead us into interesting conversations there.
And some people will never have heard of these people. I mean, everyone's heard of Einstein, but some of these others, they're for the academics to explore, but we explore them so that we can make the ideas accessible and usable to people, you know, at the sharp end who are actually on real projects in real business, tackling real uncertainties.
Who are doing the real things.
Exactly.
As you and I did for a number of years.
Well, and I still do.
I still do. Well, tell us about how you got into this idea of risk management, how you got into that arena. What did you do before you got into that? Take us through a journey a little bit, if you would.
Well, I have two previous careers. So I started life as a research biochemist, and I was involved in the early techniques that are now used in genetic engineering, trying to understand how to control gene expression, turning genes on and off. And I developed a technique which is now used in the production of monoclonal antibodies, which was my very first career that nobody knows about. And then I spent 10 years as a project manager. And I was working for a major engineering company in the UK. I'm English, as you can probably tell. And somewhere along the way, as a project manager, we were doing some work for the Ministry of Defence. And they made a ruling that all defence projects must use risk management. They'd heard about it in the oil and gas sector. This is in the 70s, late 70s. And so I'm older than I look, of course.
You started very young.
I did start very young, yes. I came across risk management in 1983. And the Ministry of Defence said, we have to use it. So my company asked me as a junior project manager, find out what it is and use it on your project, see if it works. So I did some research. I talked to the guys in the oil and gas sector, in the North Sea, and BP and Shell and so on. Found out about risk management there and worked out how to apply it to my project. It was very successful, and so I then got the job of applying risk management to other projects in our company, and eventually I became the strategic risk advisor to the board in a period of 5 years. So I discovered risk management, took it from the oil sector to the engineering and defence sector, found that I could do it quite well. Found it very interesting. And then went from there into more broader risk consulting. And so I've been doing that for 35 years. Oof, long time.
Yeah. We all start young and grow with other thoughts.
But there are two reasons why I do risk management and why it keeps my interest. Yes. One is that it works. And a lot of people say risk management is a great idea, but it doesn't help them. And I think they must be doing something wrong. They're not finding the real risks, or they're not applying really effective strategies. For me, risk management is the difference between success and failure, because we plan to succeed, and our plans are all, if everything goes well, we'll deliver our objectives on time, on budget, and then something happens, and then we're late and we're over time. That's something that happened that we hadn't foreseen, that we hadn't planned for. Of course, those are risks. And if we had seen those things in advance and were able to plan for them and position ourselves beforehand, then we could deal with them effectively and deliver on time and on budget and on scope. So if we manage our risks, we'll be more successful. It seems obvious. So doing risk management properly is the difference between success and failure. So risk management works. But the other reason I'm still interested in risk management after 30 more years is because it's developing, it's changing. There are things that we now know about risk and how to manage it that we never understood in the 80s or the 90s. And so that keeps me interested, keeps me wanting to know more, wanting to discover more about risk and risk management, and to help other people to do it better. So I'd see my role as a blend of thought leader, trying to work out what the next things coming are, and practitioner, sort of expert practitioner, doing it in practice, and then putting the two together. So you have new ideas, but they work in the field.
Well, that's very interesting progress there. Following up on that, how do you see organizations actually using the concepts of risk management? To what extent are they doing that, do you see it?
It's quite variable. I mean, I've worked in 50 countries. I visited my 50th country actually earlier this week.
Well.
And obviously there's another 140 countries to go. But I've seen, the challenges in many different cultures. I've been on every continent except the Antarctic, which is much too cold for me. And I've worked in lots of different industries and different cultures and so on. And so for some people, risk management comes naturally. It's part of their cultural way to challenge things, to think about ambiguity and different ways of thinking. Other cultures are much more confined and constrained. And for them, it's inappropriate to challenge or to think outside the box or to go beyond the limits. And so they find it hard to understand uncertainty. It's actually disloyal, or it's unprofessional to think of things not being as they are in the plan. So there are some cultural overlays which are very interesting. But I think the question of maturity is something we're thinking about in project management and in a number of other fields, and it's true of risk management too. Some organizations are much more mature in their understanding and practice of risk management, and others are much less mature. So I think it's very well practiced in some countries and some cultures and some industries and some organizations, and others have never even heard of it. They're just starting. And so I developed a risk management maturity model in 1996, which tried to capture some of those basic principles of what risk management maturity means, so that we can assess where companies are or organizations on that spectrum and help them to just take the next step.
Well, that's very interesting. You were talking about the cultural differences in addressing risk, and we had discussed this a number of times, and that's from a national culture, if you like to call it that. How about professional cultures? You see much difference there, the way certain professions may approach risk versus others?
Absolutely. And one of the books that I wrote is called Managing Group Risk Attitude, and it's focused on the influence of the group on the way that we manage risk.
Okay.
And the group exists at multiple levels. The group could be the project team, or it could be the program or portfolio, or a department, or an organization, or an industry sector, or a nation. We're all groups at different levels, different hierarchies. And within the organization, clearly organizational culture has a lot of influence on the way that we define our projects, the amount of risk that we choose to take in the scope of the project, the way that we price, the amount of contingency we have, all these things, the technical solutions that we choose, these are all driven by the organizational risk culture. And then when we draw a project team together, the project team develops its own project culture, which includes a project risk culture, which is driven by the individuals within the team, as well as the context of the organizational culture. And very often there are problems in projects where the project risk culture doesn't match the organizational risk culture. So you may have, let's say, an organization that wants to take risk in a particular area because they want to be innovative or competitive and move into a new market area, for example. But the project team are more risk averse. They're more careful and cautious. And so they don't take the big steps that the company needs. Or the other way around, where the company wants to be cautious and the project team are saying, let's go for this, let's try something different, and that doesn't match the company culture either. So it's important that you have aligned cultures at all levels, and it's a big influence. But the problem is with culture, it's subconscious, it's invisible, and so it's very hard to see the influence of culture unless you understand how it works in influencing attitudes and behavior. So one of my recent thoughts is what I call the ABC model of culture. So C obviously stands for culture, but where does culture come from? Culture comes from repeated behavior. So you do something over and over again, it becomes the way we do things. So behavior, repeated behavior leads to culture. But where does behavior come from? Behavior comes from our attitudes, from the way that we think. The way you think determines how you act. So our attitudes shape our behavior, and repeated behavior forms culture, but culture feeds back to influence behavior and attitudes. So you can have a negative ABC loop that says, let's think about risk. We have an inappropriate view of risk. We think risk is always and only bad, for example. That leads to a view of behavior towards risk, which is always protecting, adding contingency, being cautious, which leads to a very risk-averse culture, which in turn reinforces that thinking. So that has a negative spiral which says risk is something to be avoided and we don't want risk on our projects or in our business. Or you can have a positive that says risk is something to be embraced, it's challenging, it offers opportunities, which leads to behavior which is much more interested in exploring the uncertainty to see where we can work in a different way, which develops a culture which is more risk-seeking, which reinforces the positive loop. So I think culture is really, really important at the organizational level, as long as you see it in the context of the project culture and the national culture.
Of course, global culture as well, I'm sure, given many companies, many organizations are becoming very much global. So,
well, I don't know. What do you think about globalization? Is there a global culture, or is it just an interaction of multiple lower level cultures? I don't know. In Britain, we have this big question about British culture and British identity. And multiculturalism. And multiculturalism says there are multiple cultures, not one, but there are multiple which all have to get along together, which is a little different from the American approach, which is the melting pot and we all put everything in and then we become the one American culture. So there are different views of that kind of global culture. I'm not sure we really have a handle on that.
Well, we're learning, I suppose, collectively. In some of the work we've done, we said the first part of culture is to recognize that there are different cultures and develop some respect at the fact, okay, let's see what the other cultures have. And then maybe we can reach a level we can collaborate, and the thought, as maturity grows, we may get to a point where we can infuse good things from various cultures in the project team.
Yes, yes.
Or in an organization, or larger than that.
Yes.
So if we can infuse the good things, we can really achieve higher levels collectively than we could have done as individual entities.
Yes, that's right.
That's one thought, and I don't know if that's working yet or not, but we keep...
I'm sure that's true. I think it's a good goal to have, isn't it?
It's a good goal. Well, what would you say to people who say, "Oh, think positive. Don't think of that terrible stuff. That's bad." Well, what do you think? What do we say to those good people?
Well,
they mean well.
They do, but we have to live in the real world, and in the real world, stuff happens.
Stuff happens.
I was coming here yesterday. I missed my connecting flight. I lost my bag. I arrived too late for dinner, and I'm the risk expert. So,
that's right.
And people always laugh when bad things happen to a risk expert. Oh, you should have seen that coming. Well, I caught another plane and I found my bag, and we're having lunch together. So there's always a backup plan. But stuff happens, and you can't be so optimistic that you assume everything will always go right.
Sure.
And that's how we first discovered risk management. Sure. In the 70s, we had the all goes to plan. Mm-hmm. You assume everything is fine, and then you start the project, and it isn't. And was it Clausewitz who said, no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy? As soon as you start, things change. Yes. So we have to recognize that in the real world, it doesn't always go to plan.
Yep.
And the important thing is not just to identify these potential bad things, but then to prioritize them. So that, there may be some things which, yes, it could completely throw the project off course, but it probably won't happen. And other things where it probably will happen, but the impact is very small. Sure. And so we're in proper risk management, we're not worrying about insignificant stuff or stuff which is improbable. Yep. We're trying to find the real risks that really could happen, that really could have a material impact on the project. And so it's true, if we were worrying about a myriad of different things, it would be a waste of time. But the point of the process is first identify, then prioritize, so you focus on the big ones and deal with those.
Well, thank you very much. And as far as contact with the enemy, we hope that in project management we have only friends out there. But we know
that's not true. It's just not true.
You're absolutely right. No. And we at times paraphrase President Eisenhower that the plan is useless, but planning is essential.
Yes.
So
yes,
all
exactly.
similar lines of what you were telling us, indeed. What do you see as major differences, say, in industries? Do you see any industries more likely to adopt risk management thoughts, principles than others, governments or?
Well, traditionally, risk management has been the province of large and complex projects. Sure. So we've had it in aerospace and defense and in major civil engineering and then increasingly in construction. But there are also other big mega projects like pharmaceutical projects, drug development projects, where traditionally they haven't used a formal approach to risk management because they've just used the kind of the mass approach. Let's investigate 100 or 1,000 potential drugs, and then we'll narrow it down to find the ones that might be useful. That is a kind of risk management, and you could use a risk-based approach to drug development, which actually makes that whole narrowing much faster and more efficient. So it's beginning to come into that sector. But then we've got the new sort of innovative, the fast-moving types of industries, the innovation creative industries, where they recognize that they have to capture opportunities really quickly because otherwise it will be gone or someone else will find it. And so the old industries, if we might call them that, the big complex projects, have really focused on threat-based risk management. Because they're safety critical, because if something goes wrong, there's a lot of money at stake. But the new industries are cottoning on to risk management, are taking up risk management from the opportunity perspective. Good. Because they find it's a way of finding more opportunities faster and capturing them more effectively and helping them to be even faster in their innovation cycle. So there's a kind of a growth in the threat-based risk management in the big, heavy industries. and a growth in opportunity-based risk management in the fast innovation industries, the entrepreneurial industries. And what I'd like to see, of course, is some crossover. Because, you know, we all know from the dot-com boom of 15 years ago when that entrepreneurial explosion happened and everybody failed because they were so focused on the opportunities they missed the threats. And then we find in some big construction and aerospace and other kinds of projects that are so big, they focus so much on the threats that they never take the opportunities. And if they had opportunities to work faster, smarter, cheaper, they would deliver and save a lot more money than they're wasting at the moment. So I'd like to see some opportunity management in the big heavy industries and some threat management in the entrepreneurial industries. But I think it's becoming very widespread. Everybody recognizes the world is uncertain and we have to do something about it.
Well, then we have to keep learning. You're absolutely right. Speaking of that, across or throughout a project lifecycle, some of the research we did some time ago pointed out that many companies organizations tend to focus on the early stages in a project where they identify risks, prioritize them, they may come up with plans to respond to risks, etc., positive or negative, etc. But as the project progresses in its life cycle, everybody gets busy doing what they're doing, and they don't necessarily keep track as much as they really should on what they have done earlier, because they all almost overwhelmingly reported that that early part was very, very useful, very helpful, very beneficial. Well, if it is, continuing with it should be beneficial, but we get busy. So is that changing, or what's your view on that?
I think it's true that risk management has a big value, a big role to play at the beginning of the project in defining, first of all, the objectives, and then the scope, and then the technical solution, and the way that we're planning the project. Because we want to take the right amount of risk in order to gain the reward that we're looking for. And that risk-reward balance is really important at the beginning of the project. But then, as we execute the project, as we've just said a moment ago, things happen during the project and things change. And so as things change, the risk exposure changes. So our initial risk solutions that we planned at the beginning of the project may no longer be appropriate when we get through into the middle of the project. So I would say we should repeat our risk assessment at each phase change. Every time you move from high-level design to detailed design, or detailed design to execution, or whatever phases you use, at each phase gate, reassess your risk exposure. At every major change, whether it's a scope change or it's a change in the requirement or some new change in the personnel, if there's a big change request comes through, it will change the risk exposure. And looking at risk should be part of our impact analysis of the changes too. So you must be looking at risk as you go through the project because things continue to change. The only time you don't need to do risk management is when the project's finished, because nothing can change. And it's now certain we are where we are, we finished, we've got what we've got, and there's no uncertainty. But until that moment, when there are still uncertainties that matter, then we still need to do risk management.
Absolutely. Certainly after the project, we still need to take the lessons learned, apply them in future.
Into operations as well, and also lessons learned for the future.
For future projects. So all of that is absolutely essential. It really increases the value of an organization. It's intellectual value, its ability to do things.
Well, project knowledge management is a really important growing subject.
Absolutely.
And the idea that you do a project for two reasons. One is to deliver the deliverables, and the other is to improve your ability to do that kind of project. So next time you don't start with a blank sheet of paper, you have all of this learning and wisdom from the previous project. And so knowledge management is about generating knowledge, capturing it and passing it on to the next project or to the organization. And clearly that's true of risk as well. That if there are risks which are inherent in the types of projects that we do, every time we find one of those generic risks, we need to pass it on to future projects and embed it into standard operating processes so that we have an effective way of dealing with the risks that we found before and we don't make the same mistakes twice.
Well, that's great, and thank you for tying risk management to very important project parameters such as managing the scope and the schedule and managing knowledge. At times we have been claiming that it has strong tie also to managing quality, that if we cut corners on quality, we're taking a risk. It may still work when we cut the corner, but it may not. So what's your thought on that one?
Well, you know, ISO 9001, which is the international standard for quality management, it was updated in 2015.
Yes.
And one of the major changes in the 2015 edition of ISO 9001 was the introduction of what they called risk-based thinking. Really interesting. So now they're saying that all of our quality approaches need to be done in a risk-based way, which means that we have to have an eye to risk when we're managing quality. Every quality decision that we take, you know, one way or the other on our quality management will influence the risk exposure. And the risks that we're taking will influence our ability to meet our quality requirements. So they clearly are related. And so 9001 2015 edition is saying risk-based thinking is inherent, or should be inherent, in the way that we manage quality.
Sure, and that probably is a case in several other standards we think of as we progress in our thinking and risk management, embedding it in various standards.
Well, I think so. I mean, basically, risk management is about making appropriate decisions in the face of uncertainty. And we make decisions in every area of life. And it's interesting if you think about the future of risk management. Some people say that risk management might disappear as a discipline altogether because it's just about making good decisions when we don't have all of the information. And others say that risk management will never disappear because we'll always have uncertainty, you know, poor and taxes and uncertainty and death. So we always will have to have some way of dealing with it. And I'm not sure. Sometimes I think it will become so natural to do risk management that we don't need a separate discipline. Other times I think, well, maybe we should just have that kind of reminder that it's important with a separate discipline that exists on its own.
Well, that's great. And if you would take us a bit further into your view of the future of risk management, as well as at large, the future of project, program, and portfolio management, if you would.
Well, that's a very big subject. And who knows? You know, the whole point is that everything about the future is uncertain.
That's right.
You know, I'm not going to make cast iron predictions and we come back in a year and you say, you were wrong. But I do have a view. I think, let me say three things about risk management that I think should develop, and I really hope will develop, and certainly in our business, in the Risk Doctor Partnership, we're working towards making these things applicable and usable. The first is integration. The main problem with risk management has been that it's standalone, it's seen as a separate thing we do on the side. We're running the project here, we're running the business here, and we're doing risk management over in the silo here. And occasionally we throw a risk report or a risk register over the fence. Here, look at this, and they say, okay, we'll look at that. But it's not integrated. So I think we need to see integration of risk management into the project, integration into the program and portfolio, integration into the business and strategic thinking, so that we have a closer interface between the risk information that comes out of the risk process and the other project processes. So when we're planning, when we're estimating, when we're doing resource management, when we're doing change control, when we're doing stakeholder engagement, all of those things need to take account of uncertainties that matter, risks that could affect them. So risk management needs to be fully integrated. And when we're making strategic decisions about our positioning as an organisation, about our product mix, about our market level, about our financial decision making, all of those things need to take account of strategic risks. So it needs to be integrated. The second thing, which is very closely linked to that, is risk and decision making. The point of understanding the risks is to help you do things differently. And I always say that risk management, the output of risk management, has two purposes: attention and action. The idea of the risk process is to draw your attention to things that you didn't currently know. You should know this, you don't know it, the risk process will reveal it to you. So it's attention. This is something you need to know that you don't know. And action, when you know that, you should be doing something that you're not currently doing. So now I know what the risks are. Oh, I'm so glad I know that. Now I shall do this. So if it doesn't draw attention and it doesn't result in action, it's a waste of time. So where do we pay attention and take action? Most of the time it's in the way we make decisions. So I would like to see project decisions, portfolio decisions, strategic decisions, all made in the light of risk. And that needs that integration to support decision making at different levels. So my first change would be better integration of risk management with the rest. Second is the active use of risk information to make decisions through the attention and action sort of channel. And the third thing is a much better attention to the people aspects, the soft aspects of risk management. To think about biases, to think about culture, as we've been talking, to think about personal preferences, personal risk appetites, and for those things to be played into the process. At the moment, we're very process-based in risk management and in projects, and we need to think much more about the influence of individuals and groups on the way that risk is perceived and understood and responded to. And again, some of us in that kind of thought leadership position are thinking about this and putting it into practice, but it needs to become mainstream. Risk is managed by people, not by processes and not by machines or computers. And so we have to take account of the people aspects. I'd like to see all of those three things in the next five years. Integration, decision making, and people, the really important things.
Well, those are all very, very valuable things. And thank you for helping us look into the future. Of course, we'll attempt to paraphrase Danish Nobel Prize laureate Niels Bohr that forecasting is difficult, especially in the
about
future.
the future. Exactly.
And
yes.
it was attributed to him and others, but thank you for taking us there, because that really is a very important thing to keep our sights on the picture down the road.
Well, I see risk management as a forward-looking radar. It scans the future.
Yes.
And it says, these are bad things in my project, I must steer away. These are good things I must steer towards. And we can do that scanning for risk management itself and say, let's look out into the future and see what's coming towards risk management and how can we embrace those things and build them in to the way that we practice.
Well, that's great. And thank you very much, Dr. Hillson, for giving us your insights into current and future status of risk management, its progress. It's been a great pleasure to have you at Drexel.
Well, I've enjoyed it very much, Frank. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay.
We've been talking with Dr. David Hillson, a global leader in project risk management thoughts. Thank you.